How does a region built on oil and finance become a leader in AI and emerging tech? And what challenges come with the transformation? Today's guest, Ameen Altajer, is the center of it all. He's the CEO of Infiniteware, a Google developer expert in machine learning, and a speaker who has worked with Aramco, STC, and the government of Bahrain. With over 15 years in AI, cybersecurity, game development, blockchain, he is shaping the future of tech in the Arab world. We'll talk about AI adoption in the Gulf, scaling technology in large organizations, and the future of talent in the region. Plus, we'll dive into AI's role in industries like oil and gas, its connection with blockchain, and why game development is still a huge opportunity waiting to grow. Let's get started. Hi, Ameen. How are you doing today?
Hey, Moses. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. And I'm very glad I've been trying to make this happen for probably a year now. You're a busy man.
Thanks.
So what's going on now in your life? What are the exciting projects you're working on? Or the most exciting?
So everything is really fast, as you probably can guess. But we've been working on a lot of products. Our flagship product is something that I'm really passionate about. It's called Noura News. It's actually my daughter. And it came into existence because, given my 15 years working in the corporate space, I've always believed that it is such a hassle to get to the information you want and get things done. And Noura News was always this guinea project that I was working on the side that allows me to have a gateway to all of these systems that are within the organization, whether it's your ERP, your CRM, your ITSM, you name it. And I wanted to be very frictionless, meaning that I wanted to speak in my own native tongue without, shaping and changing the way I talk just to cater to the AI or to the machine. And, we had multiple ways of making things work in experimentation. However, as of today, in this era where you have large language models and the likes of ChatGPT and Claude and all these things, and Whisper and transcription, you have all the right pieces to make the product really work. And we've been happy that we've been shipping for the last 2 years directly after ChatGPT came in. But the only difference is we do all of that completely on-premise, which means completely offline. And that is really lucrative if you're discussing this with the government or you're discussing this with enterprises like financial institutions, where I come in exactly, that care about having everything in an air-gap environment. So pretty exciting. You see where this is going to go, but it's all awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. Actually, I've written down a few questions. You have such a interesting profile, so I had to sit down and I went to your website. I went to your LinkedIn profile, and one of the first questions that I would like you to tell us is you're sitting in Bahrain today. You've worked extensively in the region. You've also studied in the U.S. in California. So you've seen West and the Middle East. And my first question is, what do you think, or how does the Gulf's approach to AI differ, if it does differ from the West?
Very good question. Now, just for the record, I actually worked in California, did not study there. I studied
Okay, yeah, work there. That's very good.
Yeah, in public schools and public university. The big difference is, look, the region here has a specific dynamic that the West has to understand. Look, we like AI technologies. It works really well, but we're still very picky about sovereignty. And I keep talking about sovereignty as a very big thing because you can see it in all these big countries, like, for example, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, the way they're shaping their infrastructure for artificial intelligence, be it large language models, whatever it is, it's all about bringing the same technology that is powering these large commercial experiences, such as ChatGPT and the like, but they have it completely offline within their jurisdiction. Now, this is a very major pain point. It's a major challenge from a technology perspective and from a business in governance as well, because when you're relying on the cloud, when you're relying on these commercial tools, you take a lot of things for granted. It's just a matter of an API call, it's a matter of an install SaaS service, and everything is up and running. But to have the full experience to run it here, we need the human capital to run it. We need the exact infrastructure. So this is a very big part of the Middle East that the West is still trying to comprehend. This is why I like what Grok has. I'm sure you've been through Leap, right? The last,
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, so the last announcement that they had was the 1.5 billion investment in Grok. And you got to understand the background of this. The Saudi wants to break an inference and company completely to turn the show within Saudi. This is a very smart decision, if you ask me, because this means down the road, whatever happens, Saudi can still use the perks of AI, everything that they built on this infrastructure, but without having that reliance on a major cloud provider that can be caught in any political, shenanigans.
Sanctions,
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
S- Do you think so? Do you think the region is moving towards that, having more sovereignty over their data? And is that also why the Saudi Arabia? I remember they built like embassies. What did they call it? Like data centers, where even they were saying instead of you keeping our data, why don't you let us even like host your data and you're still sovereign? Like
Exactly.
we are switching.
Yeah. So it's a big thing that all of these perks that we're using through AI, all these things, they take a lot of components to work, and compute is such a big deal, and we take it for granted as a retail regular users. We don't understand how our phones are doing the bulk of the magic. The reality is, major cloud providers like Google Cloud Platform, Microsoft Azure, AWS, they have huge amount of posts that are scattered in the world, regions, and everything. And we have also one here on behind, by the way. So ME South 1, which is the main region that they created in the Middle East, is the actual established here in Bahrain. So yeah, this gives us a lot of power in terms of the experiences. So when you have a game service, the latency is pretty low compared to the last 10 or 15 years because AWS is running a big, army of machines here running. But that also comes with a price. With this means you're relying on a commercial entity and you are not sure what's going to happen in the political, realm. So the great example is what happened between Russia and Ukraine. It's like a big slap in the face in the air and in the climb of like in the political space. Because I had actually friends that had software and they had applications in multiple countries, including Russia. But all of a sudden, because they have a commercial entity, you know, somehow stuck in between, they have to abide by compliance and regulatory frameworks, right? And you are caught in the middle. It's crazy. So I'm a big believer in sovereignty. I think it's the right choice. And it's such a good decision. Your data remains here, your computer remains here. From a high availability point of view, you're not held hostage for any commercial offering, but at the same time, you can really feel stability and reliance on what you have.
Exactly. And I think as well, culture matters. And you mentioned before Arabic language and LLM models. Uh, do you think we should have like the Arab world should develop their own large models where that, obviously the spit out what we put in, like the kind of data affects the outcome.
Yeah.
And it's like you're raising them with your own in your own language and all the culture. Are there any, or in your opinion, what are the biggest constraints for AI startups in the region or anybody who's working with AI? If they're
Look, I mean, the commercial LLMs are not that, but the reality of the matter is there's little to no interest in building proper LLMs for the Middle East. Of these, okay, this is a very big claim, but what I'm trying to say, we're kind of slow compared to the adoption, like in terms of the English language and the rest of the languages out there. And okay, like look, if we're being honest, as the Middle East, we don't have that sort of culture where we have open data and all these things, the things that we take for granted if you're coming from the West. But also, these LLMs, they have the capacity to reason, they have the capacity to give you text, but they're bound by the domain or the discipline that they're coming from. So if you are working in government, there are a lot of things on the inside where you want to at least fine tune the models, meaning you get a large language models, something open source, let's say Llama 3.3 or anything that is pretty popular by Meta or anybody else. Exactly. But in order to make it very worthy, or let's say to make it very reliable, generally what people do is they fine tune it on with a data set that belongs to the domain they're in. So countries and governments that care about their sovereignty, they're not going to do it to a commercial class. Let me tell you that. Yes, I mean, it depends on your appetite for risk and your appetite for confidentiality, but I do know for sure that governments that are crazy about confidentiality, they're not going to use some commercial class, which means they will probably work with open source, which is amazing if you ask me, because back in the last 2 years, they have something similar to GPT-4 or GPT 3.5. You had to spend millions of dollars. But now we're piggybacking on basically on whatever Meta has worked on, whatever Mestral has worked on. These companies, yes, they're trying to compete in a capitalist environment, but we are getting the perks of all of this work. We're getting their models, and we know how to basically, fight to them, and we can get something specific to our needs. So when DeepSeek came in, I was the first person to collapse. Okay, we have more options, man, which is awesome. So yeah.
Well, it made the stock market crash, I have to say, unfortunately. Like,
Yeah, that was sudden, but like it was a reaction, it was a reflux, but I think the market got stable. But that is actually very interesting thing because you know why? This could mean two things. It could mean either that NVIDIA is overhyped, which is debatable because they are in the compute business now, way far from the gaming business where they started. Or it could mean AI is not going to be as expensive as we thought. And this is what Sam Altman has been speaking about, if you think about it. He's saying, look, we need a lot of money
yeah,
to get compute running. And this is the only way for humanity. But when DeepSeek comes in,
yeah,
and when they came in and they had this sort of paper and all of these novel things that they worked on, like mixture. Okay, so mixture of experts. And I don't know if you want to get into details of the technicality, but
yeah. Go ahead. Yeah,
yes, they brought a couple of cool things. And this week, actually, they were releasing a lot of open source code, which is very neat. But it shows you that machine learning and LLMs, they still has a long way before we, call today and say, look, we need a lot of compute. So this puts a lot of pressure on companies like NVIDIA, OpenAI, which is great if you ask me as a vendor on the side.
yeah. No, exactly. I think these are very exciting times, and but again, I actually would like to go back to AI in the Middle East. Do you think one of the things I was been thinking about was the language itself? Is Arabic a challenge when you're trying to build a model from the scratch, and given how complicated it is and the different dialects, and also the fact that we don't have as much data in Arabic written
Yeah,
online?
exactly. So it's complicated.
Walk us through.
Sure. So from a syntax perspective, from a grammar perspective, Arabic is much more difficult, honestly. And there's been a lot of trials, let's say experimentation. There's really reputable institutions, even in the Middle East. There's one in Abu Dhabi, there's one in Dubai, if I'm not mistaken, where they have cool experiments. So even Falcon, if you know TII, they've been
Yeah.
trying Falcon when it came in, it was such a big deal, to compete with whatever that was there. But the language itself, it's much more complicated to comprehend. You might have the same letters, but the notations on the letters can happen totally differently. So how do you convey this sort of thing to the machine? English is much better. There are a couple of things that you can add on a word, and then you can have a different meaning. So
Mm.
grammatically, or let's say syntax wise, you can actually visually see it. In Arabic, it's much more nuanced. There's a lot of granularity. So to capture all of that and to allow the LM to pick it up, it's much harder. This is why technology is one thing, but just like you mentioned, the data itself is such a ping pong. Like even in Bahrain, even in Saudi is much better, honestly, for being honest. And
Why?
Bahrain. Saudi has institutions that focus on Arabic. It's a major
Oh yeah, right.
aspect of their identity, about their culture. And if you ask me, governance there, at least for the AI space, is much a bit better. Like they have Sadai, which is the authority for AI in Saudi. Now, this is a great achievement because you need a sponsor of some sort to carry on these responsibilities with one torch. The rest of the countries, from my experience, again, depend on what country you're in, but
Countries around the world, or are you talking about the GCC region? Yeah.
GCC and the Middle East, you have fragmented initiatives, which is not bad. That's a great start, but it would have been much nicer if you had a unified sort of, sponsor for the whole initiative. So we don't really have that to it. But data, we have a problem, and let's say a cultural issue with. Not everybody's willing to share data. A lot of people um, think of it as like, okay, no matter what it is, it can be confidential to me.
Yeah.
Even government bodies, they have this sort of sensitivity towards sharing open stuff as well. But nothing can, because you can't expect the government to do everything. It's generally the private sector and the public sector, they work in tandem. You got to get some things outside so people like you, businesses, can jump in and, work with whatever you have on the inside to build products and services. So it's a mix of a lot of things, but I don't want to say it's all challenges. There's there's a light in the end of the, basically tunnel. Things are getting much better. But yes, Saudi is doing it correctly for asking me.
But would you say that Saudi is leading the way in the Middle East, or is it
Yeah.
Dubai or UAE? Because they have an AI ministry as well, right? Or
Yes. So Dubai and just like you say, UAE and Saudi, they're going hand in hand. It's very close competition if you ask me. But I personally like the way Saudi is really doing it. The governance is a pretty big deal of doing initiatives and having that government sort of outlook on the whole process. And they have open source, by the way, and they have open data and they have regulations, and regulations is a pretty big deal. These companies, if you let them work on their own, they're gonna adopt whatever is in capitalism. They're gonna do whatever gives them cash. But to have a sort of big brother, at least good big brother, to come in and set the rules and how to work, working with it, and they're powerful. And everybody knows Sama, or the central bank of Saudi. They don't play around, which is something you appreciate if you work in that space. So, yeah, it's a mixture of a lot of things, but I think Saudi is definitely, they have a really good traction.
so speaking of Saudi, what do you think is what were the biggest challenges of integrating AI into massive, corporations like Aramco or STC? Are there any challenges?
Yeah. So these sectors are really sensitive. Like if we
Mm,
talk about telecommunication, we talk about oil, energy, these spaces resemble the majority of what these nations offer. So you got to tread extremely carefully, right? And one of the things that just like what I said in the beginning, the technology is there on the outside and it's abundant if you are giving sovereignty and access to your data and compute.
yeah,
But because we do understand how these fields work and the sensitivity of these domains, replicating things offline, putting things on the ground is a much tougher deal. This is why Saudi, just like what I said at the beginning, I don't want to repeat the tape here, but the challenges um, in terms of scale. Like, you're not running a small SME, that you can get away with in, let's say, disgruntled customer, and that's it. And the whole process, the whole economy runs through oil. And if you get it incorrect, you might really shoot yourself in the foot. So the challenges are like within governance, within the adoption, but unique capital is also a big deal. Like the West, Silicon Valley for a long time, they've been dealing with things and they take it for granted. But to bring that culture here to the Middle East, it's a brand new thing. It's getting much better and it's awesome now compared
yeah.
to before. But it's still, we have a long way to go, to really become, let's see, the capital of AI in this world, which is everybody's trying to fight over this.
Exactly, and I think even if we were to talk about Saudi in particular, Saudi Arabia right now is attracting a lot of talent, and they are serious about what they're doing. Like they really want to
Yes.
be a hub for AI, not only in the region but in the rest of the world. Like I was at Leap a few days ago, and it's amazing. And also, they are taking like they are making big bets. They are willing to even risk some capital, and that is what is happening in Silicon Valley as well, right? Like there's capital, like it's easy to raise capital to test ideas, without fear. You might fail, you might succeed, but at least you have access to capital, which is very important for innovation, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So Aramco Digital, for example, when we were
Oh,
discussing this in Saudi, so it's a very brave move out of them to get Grok. Grok is only one thing. And they have a lot of investments and they had for a while, I'm not sure if you remember, they wanted to get investments into the semiconductor space as well,
yeah.
which was something through Sam Altman. But if I'm not mistaken, it got blocked by the US government somehow, which shows you so much of how compute is really a big deal. Compute is equivalent to intelligence, equivalent to power or sovereignty to war.
No. So exactly, and energy as well, access to energy, and I think that GCC is placed is in a very good place. Like if you have the talent, you have the tech, that you have access to energy in your, I think,
Yeah.
there's life, right? Energy.
But even politically, 100%, we have the energy to earn these things. And even politically, if we can get into that as well, like we're in good terms with China, we're in good terms with the US, we're trying to be unbiased. Like it's very clear of how the Middle East is doing that. So you're getting perks of both of those. Like we have access to Shenzhen and their manufacturing power, but at the same time, we're in good terms with the US and we can get some of these immediate chips if we wanted to. Yes, we are in a restricted area, but we can still work with them, unlike China. So it's a very good political position. It's a strategic position. And at the same time, we have the capital to experiment, with such a
Exactly.
technology.
Maybe that's why, I mean, look at the US. The US and Russia are meeting, and they're holding their talks right now about the Ukraine war there in the peninsula, right? So it must be for a reason. Um, what do you think? How do you see the future of AI in the world, but also in the region? And what are you working on right now? What does your company provide?
So when we started Infiniteware, we were trying to figure out our niche in AI. Long story short, for 15 years ago or 16 years ago, my entry point to the AI space was actually writing AI NPCs for games. And this turned out to be something that I was adopting for a long time. But when I started, I was always under the impression that AI will always have to be spoon fed, for it to get you its magic. But now, like LLMs have been a very big point of my life, and I'm sure a lot of people, because love it or hate it, even the AI experts in the world, like experts is such a big word, but at least the academics working in that space, they do acknowledge it might not be the holy grail of AI, you know, like Yann LeCun, the awesome French guy, Yeshua Bengio, and the cool guys working, Jeffrey Hinton. These guys have been working on this space for a long time, neural networks. The premise is cool, but they all debate that you don't need this amount of compute to get things done. But leave that aside and talk about the perks for the commercial space. LLMs, they resemble the majority of what humans can do, at least in the corporate setup. Like I used to work in banking psychologically for the last 10 years, more than 10 years. And when I used to look at people and understand what they do in terms of like their work and their workload on a daily basis, I can vouch as a technologist that you can slash 80 or probably 60% for being moderate of their workloads on a daily basis, because all of that revolves around sending an email, trying to reason within reason, not crazy creative reason, like much like an artist. Automating stuff, following a recipe. This has always been done through RPAs and these tools, but to have a reasoning engine, much like an LLM, was always the missing piece. And you don't have to spend that much of compute to train it. This was already done by big conglomerates such as AWS and the like. Now, as a company, you can just get a small brain, couple of gigabytes, run it with the right GPU node, and you are in business. You can literally automate what people are doing. And lo and behold, now we have ages. And ages, they take it one basically step further, where they say, look, it's not about this one thing. If inferencing is already there, allow the agent to make decision and ask different people and go to different tools. So it's much like an employee if you think about it. You lay down the work, you give them the tools, you tell them, look, you can contact me as a manager. You can send an email. You can access this HR system. And you are the brain of the operation. Here's the task. I don't care how you're going to do it, but you have everything that it takes you to get to the job. So the premise from a theory perspective is fantastic. And this is where LMs really come in. They solve this autonomous sort of delegation effort that humans or employees do, and it's doing a good job. So we built our AI solution, which is Neurons, which is one of among many, using like multiple AI tools that we progress, like over time. However, LLMs became a very big part of it. But now, in its latest sort of fashion, we have agents doing the work. And this is the way we advocate our work to customers. We tell them, look, we give you literally virtual employees. Show us the workload, give us the APIs, and we run the whole thing in an offline setup. And they can't believe it the second they try the demos, because there are things that you take for granted. For example, you might have a sophisticated use case where, for example, go to the HR system, see how many leaves that I have, you compare that against the procedure of the HR, for example. This is a very legit use case, but it spans multiple resources. Back with LLMs on their own, it used to be hard to do this because you had to feed the large language model a lot of information and you had to treat it like a kid who memorized a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But now with agents, you only rely on the large language model to reason, not to memorize stuff. You just need to understand the query and break it down, and then it can on its own get the information. And the beautiful thing is you can have another agent to validate the effort of the first agent. So you're basically building a
The
balance.
supervisor, right?
Exactly. And it doesn't stop here. You can build complicated structures. If you think about it, Moses,
Yeah.
it's like building a company, but in a virtual space. It's always a governance problem rather than a technology problem.
Yeah, and I totally love how he made the transition towards such a an exciting topic, AI agents. This is, I think, this is. I was gonna say this is the future, but it's already it's a presence happening right now. Um, so AI agents. Well, since we're talking about it, I'd like you to explain to our audience how it works from the scratch. Like, let's say you have a company that is trying to do their transition towards AI agents. First of all, my first question would be: is the threat to the employees in the company should be feel threatened? Also, how does the AI agent work with the data source in the company? Because obviously, so as you said, it's reasons LLM models help the AI agents reason, but it doesn't necessarily have to give it all the information because you have already the information that the company has. So let's explain it in simple words to someone who's not very familiar with AI, like to a CEO, for example.
Sure. So an agent is basically an autonomous AI system that heavily relies on this LLM component that has been pretty popular by ChatGPT and the like. And it's basically an autonomous AI functionality that allows you to get things done without explicitly programming it to do so. So you just give it a task and you give it a handful of tools and you tell it, go figure on your own. Literally, much like an employee that you trust. But if you really want to get technical about it, the way it works is that an LM is just a file, okay, or let's say a graph, if you want to be very technical about it, that takes the input from the user or whoever it is, and then it tries to understand what the next task is. So I can give you a complicated task, for example, how many leaves do I have in a year, let's say, or what is my leave balance, let's say if I'm a company. Now, when the LLM, which is part of the agent circle, gets that query, it understands, okay, so the user is asking about leaves. This is probably something that has to do with the HR system. Let me check out my tools. And it literally goes over its tools like, okay, I have access to the IT system, to security logs. Oh, there's the HR system. Let me ask the HR system. So this is your basic agent system where the HR system is exposure through an API, for example, or through a file. So we have this barrier between the system and the agent itself. And then the agent will craft the message or the request to be sent to the through the usual gateways of the HR system. So the HR system will not have to do a lot of work. It just has an API and that API stays the same. It's only that the agent will have to understand how to take that unstructured query from the user into the data that can go and respects the paradigm of that HR system. And the HR system will apply it. And this is a great thing about it for big companies because you don't need to invest much in building these systems. You can always capitalize on whatever you have. It's only that the agent have to have access.
Exactly.
Now, this can have multiple ways of looking at it from a different vantage point. So if you're an employee, there's a big chance that your job will go away. To be quite honest, we're not here to laugh about it or to joke about it. But this is also a great opportunity because this job window, is what I like to call it, will move, will offset, which means you used to pick up different things that the AI is picking that role, get more to the creative area or the reasoning areas that AI is still not there. But on the other hand, from an employer perspective, this is fantastic. And let me tell you, I run a small business compared to big companies. Like my staff are basically 8 to 9. We're not that big, but we have large accounts that we're dealing with. So we're always under the big pressure of workload and all these things to satisfy everybody. And to have literal virtual employees helping us out is beyond amazing. Like,
Makes you punch out over your weight. Like it gives such a you can compete with like big corporations, literally.
and exactly what I like to say. Like I would never, I did not ever imagine in my life that I can have an attention bandwidth in this jurisdiction. But now with large language models and the democratization of agents, I want to see you're on par with Microsoft, but you can at least compete. It's a level playground. Like every day there's a new technology. They start from scratch and we do start from scratch, which is awesome for all of us. You know, it's a clean slate for everybody. Exactly. So you go to Twitter and then there's another framework by Mistral and everybody starts again. So it's a fantastic time for employers. But what I'm trying to say here, small businesses have the ability now to offload the majority of their redundant and crazy and clunky workload to these agents. Social media aspects, let the AI agent go through your full history to understand your mission, your vision, and to draft the work like in tandem with your mission. And the way you write stuff, this was never the case before. You can have another AI agent to service you like a PA person. And I have my personal PA, Nora, here that I use actually on the go. It's like, okay, can you draft for me the quotation? And it's connected to WhatsApp. So there's no friction whatsoever. There's no sign in, nothing. And this is what we're selling to our customers. When we go to them, we are, we believe so much in the idea of automation and frictionless integration that we actually use it within like in-house. Like there's jockey quotation, send it to the client or show me before you send it. And there we go. It follows exactly my previous quotations. So to wrap it up just really quick, employees will have to shuffle a little bit, but they don't not feared in terms of like eventually every job is going to be shaken for being honest. But the employers and the employees can be the employers as well if they think about startups and they can think about entrepreneurship in different capacities. You have a great access to like machines and programs that can service you, getting to what you want without the previous pain points of hiring people. Literally.
Exactly. And as Naval Ravikant lately, I don't know if you know the guy. Uh, yeah, he's amazing. He recently said that entrepreneurs and creative people are not worried about losing their jobs to AIs.
You're right. Exactly. Right.
It just personally, I see it as a tool, obviously. And if you're really willing to work, it just it boosts. It's like it's like working out on steroids. I don't take steroids, but it's like going to the gym, but but you still have to work out. You still have to make an effort.
Yeah. You got to do the effort, but the idea of having more manpower at your disposal for help is like everybody wants that in their life. We want to focus on what matters to us. Like we're in an engineering business. We care about building cool products that work really well in corporate setups. And now, why would I care about the clunky paperwork that
Exactly.
I don't really care about as a company? So let the agents do that after you invest in building them, and that's okay.
Exactly. And also I always say that AI, you should learn AI because it's crazy. Like probably because we're interested in AI, we think everybody knows and has tried, but
You're right.
there's a lot of people who don't know anything about AI. We haven't even tried any tools. They might have heard like last week. I had a friend of mine, a French friend of mine, asking me if I've heard about ChatGPT. Everybody's talking about, sure, have you heard about it? I'm like, what? It's been around for like over 3 years now. Like,
Man.
we are in the West, so
Yeah, I agree. So, like, there's multiple layers and let's say levels of maturity, even in the AI space. Like, if you're an end user who has nothing to do with tech, just get your stuff together and work with ChatGPT as a start.
yeah,
Understand that you can automate things. Like, you have now the feature of GPTs on the left side. You can just get there, build AI tools, much like an employee, that can be really good at something. And a lot of people saw it this way. If you're more of an engineer, you can have a tighter integration, let's say with one of your systems or so, if you have the appetite for it. Uh, you can also work with things that are a little bit less risky. Let's say, for example, notification, summarization, which is interesting. Look, the world is full of data and traffic. We're bombarded by a lot of stuff. Wouldn't it be cool to have an AI agent to go over your email and to go over your chat or like the messages, tell you the highlights of what you should care about?
yeah,
I actually was looking for that until we built News because News does that. It goes over through all of your channels. Does it look? You care about your kids, right? Well, they have a school appointment tomorrow. You care about your financials, or the bank got something for you. The rest of the things, check them out later. So bandwidth is like our attention needs to have, a proper bandwidth management.
exactly, exactly. That's actually amazing. What about cybersecurity? Like, do you think AI is a threat to cybersecurity? And how do you take that in mind in your work?
Okay. Yeah, so it has a lot of facets for being honest. For example, if you are relying on commercial products such as ChatGPT and the like, you are putting all of your eggs in one basket, for being honest, because these services operate on the internet, on the public internet. So if something happens to them, you are going to be a casualty. And this is the case with OpenAI. So OpenAI got hacked. I'm not sure if you know this in the last 9 to 10 months.
Oh,
Yeah.
you know.
So So all of these girlfriend emails are going to be out there soon. Okay?
Exactly.
So this is like a simple thing, but I mean, imagine if you're a government and you have very confidential emails, communications that people should not really, or I mean, much like nations as well. So security is a pretty big deal because you're relying on these providers. Hence, why you want to bring things offline. This is one aspect. Another thing is maybe not security, but more of a, let's say, privacy slash scams, phishing, all these things. It is relevant, yes. But even though we're getting all these perks with AI, the other side as well is getting beefier by the second. So when people want to give you, like, they want to play a scam on you, they can do it much better because they can rely on AI to understand what you care about. You care about your kids, you care about your pet, your money, your school, whatever it is, and then they can create a narrative, craft a narrative that fits you really well, and you can't compete with that narrative. Now this
And
is
people
also
get the voice as well, like the voice agents.
exactly, yeah. So voice cloning. I'm not sure if you've used 11 Labs. It's crazy.
I have.
Like with 3 or 5 minutes worth of voice, you can clone somebody. Like
Mm.
if it's English, it's like, and then you can do production level cloning as well. And I mean, yes, they have controls to operate the whole thing, but if the technology is out, and the majority of these things are actually open source. So the IP, or the defining factor for these businesses, is not the technology, it's the data itself, for the most part, for being honest. Now, a hacker, or let's say a malicious entity or a government, is not going to stop at, finding the data. They're going to offer it. They're going to find it. So security is now like this cat and mouse thing with AI. It's fueling the good things, but also the challenging stuff for us as humanity.
Okay. Do you think AI is the end of coding? Like, I've heard NVIDIA's CEO a few months ago. I know I really don't agree with him, but he said you shouldn't learn to code now that we have AI, because I see coding as it's like it's gymnastics for the mind, right? Like it's
100%.
learning the logics.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't agree as well with Jensen, but I mean, he is like his his valuation is different than ours, so I don't even
Of
know.
course, yeah, like we're arrogant, being too arrogant to say this.
But what I'm trying to say, just like what you said, the whole activity of building code is just a tangible way of getting access to logic and put it in a tangible format. And as an activity, it might not go right. Maybe what he meant is that down the road, people are going to care about communicating their needs rather than figuring out the semantics or the syntax of these languages, which is something I agree with. For example, there are moments where I want to come up with a really quick script. Now, why would I go there and remember my Python scripts? Now, why would I go there?
Exactly, when you can just talk to the machine, right?
Talk to the machine, and here are the things that I want to focus on. And I know exactly how it's going to work out, but I don't know the syntax of it, right? And this is where the AI comes in, because machine learning, specifically large language models, in order for them to reason really well, believe it or not, they got fed a lot of code. So
Mm.
code is logic in the end of it. It's just another face for logic.
Yeah.
But to stop coding, maybe in the sense of writing actual code, I would tend to agree to some level, because let me tell you what, there was a moment maybe in the last 5 or 3 years where people got crazy about low code, no code platforms. And I'm completely against that, because I always thought, okay, you can never win against the granularity and nuances, for actual code. But if you see the majority of corporate workflows, it can be automated with a drag and drop, for being honest.
Yeah.
So even in game development, it's the same thing. I use Unreal Engine, and Unreal Engine has something called Blueprint, which is a sort of node environment to build logic, and it works. Some people like that, some people like that. Where it changes is maybe in the space of performance. If you care about performance, you gotta knit it granular, correct? But if AI is so good on understanding performance and human and machine architecture, maybe yes, we're just going to get to the level of explaining our intents, and AI is going to take care of us. But still, as a parent, I wouldn't go to the level of saying do not code. Coding is a matter of understanding logic, and logic is important.
Yeah, and I think as well with AI, it's important to master a language. Being able to ask the right questions as parents, like now it's sometimes it's more important. It's more important to know how to ask questions than to know that to have knowledge itself than to memorize. Like now,
Yeah.
the quality of your questions actually will decide the quality of your work.
Right. Perplexity is like that. So when Perplexity came in, I was like a big fan, because to me, like I don't. it's a rabbit hole in the end, right, Moses? You start somewhere like, crap, I'm actually like 20 kilometers away from where I started. And perplexity is like that. You ask a question and then it gives you names, it gives you references. There's a couple of suggestions you can click on, and the conversation goes on and on, never stops. Like, another tab on your Chrome. So it's pretty much like knowledge. You don't know where you're going to go. So asking the right questions and allowing AI to help you out with the right questions, where to branch out, is what I need from AI.
Exactly. It's amazing, and I think Perplexity now he says that ex OpenAI, I think he's engineer was the founder, used to be with them with OpenAI, and then but his the Perplexity now value, yeah, yeah, like half a trillion or something. It's crazy. Like it's like OpenAI and Wikipedia having a kid, right? That's what he says.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah,
It's
I mean,
amazing.
in
Blockchain,
all business. Oh,
blockchain. What AI and blockchain? Is there any like thing in common between both? And do you think AI is changing blockchain somehow?
look, if I had to summarize it in a couple of lines, AI is making intelligence a utility in blockchain, or in decentralization technology, is allowing sovereignty to become a utility. So we are living in a world where we are reliant on Google, on Microsoft, on these too big to fail businesses, right? And we've seen this theme back in 2008 when the whole thing crashed in the financial space. Like, we don't want that in a technology era, or in any technology space. I would always prefer to have my own credentials with me. Now, the reason people care about cash is because cash is king. Wherever you go, you have that financial power to spend money without relying on a big brother. But here's the twist: if you're living in a country, regulation is important, but also regulation can have a lot of impact on your choices. So having a big brother that is responsible is really important. This is where sovereignty comes in, or cash, or blockchain. Blockchain says, look, you are responsible for your own destiny. Whether you're talking about Bitcoin, for example, from a financial point of view, or even from a different perspective, like Ethereum or whatever projects we have on the blockchain space. But the idea is everything runs in a decentralized setup. Nobody is more powerful than the other peer. Everybody has the same democratic power. So it's a great idea in theory, but execution is always challenged. Like, look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin, I mean, it started in one space, but now you have people coming in just for the investment sake, which is something I'm completely against. I don't also feel that the majority of people, and this is a big claim, but it's mine. I don't understand. I don't feel that a lot of people that are crazy about Bitcoin, that are promoting and advocating for Bitcoin, understand the value of this invention, rather than just making a quick buck, at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. It's down now. By the way, it's
We'll never end, man. I'll tell you.
no, but actually, as you said, like Bitcoin crypto is great because it cuts out the middleman. You don't need banks anymore, and it's super safe. Like so you shouldn't like people should stop speculating with it because now you're making it more volatile than like too volatile to adapt by the to adopt by the wider public. Um, but then the crypto as well, sorry, the blockchain as well has other utilities, right? Like being able, it's unaltered. You can maybe for like a course, if you take a course or certificates and stuff, everything can be on the blockchain.
Yeah, that is true. So the use cases in terms of this, just like what you said, immutable kind of ledger, the immutable property, is fantastic because you can guarantee that everybody's playing fair, which is really needed when you talk about education, credentials, validation. So there are really legit use cases for it. But the $1 million question is it worthy? Is it worthwhile to spend this amount of compute? For example, if we talk about blockchain as of today, the big two consensus protocols are uh, the proof of work and the proof of stake. Proof of work has been the holy grail for a long time. Bitcoin is still adopting it, and they're very religious about it. They're not willing to change it because for them, this is the only thing that actually works. And I don't want to disagree with that often, but I do agree for now, at least, that if you're spending compute, you're spending money, so it has to be worthwhile. So if you want to cheat, it might backfire on you. And this has been the number one Bible that we're all working on. However, for people to make money, they are becoming parts of pools, if you have seen pools out there.
Mm.
But this also defies the whole concept of decentralization. So instead of having millions of people all playing fair, now you have 8 or 10 big pools, much like countries or continents, and they're aggregates of aggregates. So what's the point of decentralization if we're all part of one voice after all? On the other hand, you have proof of stake, which in theory at least works really well, but we all do know that there are a lot of compromises. For example, there's sharding. The information is no longer completely within your disposal. You have this information here, you got to rely on other people to have the information. So you're again, deflected from this whole concept of operating as a single entity, which is in Bitcoin at least. So the technology works. There's a lot of challenges from an economical perspective, sustainability perspective, and all that. But it is so sad that people are doing it for the quick buck instead of understanding that this can really give us as humanity a different way of living. You can be completely in a different physical location while having your full credentials allowing you to work and do finance and do work in different places. Look, maybe one last point. I don't want to steal much here, but look, look, governments are essentially big enterprises. You could be in a good business, you can be in a bad business. You get what I'm saying? Now, why would you put all of your chips in one basket if you can have a decentralized identity that can work everywhere? This is the holy grail, having an identity that works no matter what, that cannot be sanctioned, that cannot be under any embargo. It is so cool if you ask me.
Yeah, I love it. Is there any country in the Gulf that is adapting blockchain or using blockchain technologies? That
Yeah, so Bahrain has been the house for many crypto exchanges. So we have Rain, we have Rain, we have CoinMina, we have Binance still, but they all have a lot of action happening as we speak. But in terms of building proper blockchain projects, I've seen few things in Dubai because I do a lot of work now, and I come there and I try to be as open as possible about the pros and cons about the technology because it's not like, hey, there's a new thing, just adopt it, guys. It's cool and sexy and awesome. No, it comes with its right. I mean, is it legit? Is it credible? Do you really need it, or it's like an overkill? On the other hand, Saudi is a big no-no for blockchain from what I've heard because I've been there and I knew that their sandbox, even as central bank, it took a very long time for them to accept crypto as a concept. If I'm not mistaken, they're not allowing it to be transacted as of today, like at the same level that we have here on Bahrain. We have public exchanges. Qatar is very like risk averse towards uh,
Why do you think that is? Like, why are these governments afraid of or not want to? Why don't they want to adapt?
it's simple. You don't want to allow things that you don't understand. In
Yeah.
crypto, I mean, it brings a lot of benefits, but it might not be in favor of governments, if we're being honest.
Mm.
But governments rely on the idea of centralization. Take any central bank. Central bank eventually regulates banks to do the economy, to have proper employment status. Now, if people can transact outside of this umbrella network, imagine you're a government. What can you exactly do? You're going to lose control. You're going to be able to have people here, using their utilities, functionalities, perks, and everything, but you have zero idea about their finances, their financial power, their well being. You don't know if they're chipping in and supporting, let's say, a hostile country. So all these things, and governments spend a lot of money, especially in the financial space, to do this money laundering part, or the or the ML they call it, and or the CR, or credit reference bureau, basically, or credit reference, understanding what people are capable of financially, so they can anticipate and track it. Now with crypto, all of that it basically is down the drain. I mean, yes, you can track some of these transactions on these explorers websites for Bitcoin and such, but it is not attached to a physical identity. This is why exchanges are trying to make it mainstream and cool, if you ask me, because if you think about it, you don't need an exchange. Yeah, you don't need to exchange anything like with a proper exchange. You can just go to the black market and do it peer to peer, like the OGs before. And now you can submit your identity, part of the KYC process, and then you're going to transact in Bitcoin. So for anybody else, including the government, they can always say, hey, this is Ameen, and these are all the accounts that belong to Ameen or the wallet addresses, right?
Because your identity is verified by the exchange. And is there an Arabic exchange like Coinbase?
So we have Rain, right?
Arab?
Right. Yeah, we have Rain, which is originally a Saudi initiative, not a business.
Yeah.
But they did not do it in Saudi. They started doing it here in Bahrain because the sandbox from the central bank here in Bahrain was a little bit more relaxed, let's say, back then.
Yeah.
So it's always a two-way sword of bringing things you don't understand and I'm trying to understand them in due time, but at the same time, it can be very impactful, either in a positive way or a negative way.
Which is totally normal, totally understandable. Quantum computing. I know it's moving very quickly, and I don't know if are we thinking about this in Bahrain and in the rest of the region and the security, whatever security impact it might have on everything.
In Bahrain, I did not see anything relevant
Yeah.
to quantum computing, but it is accessible. You can find it on IBM's cloud. You can try it because they have the hardware, and it requires a specific sort of programming to work with that paradigm. But the cool thing is that we are charting a new territory where compute might not be as crazy as we thought, which means this might have benefits on machine learning or any compute intensive workloads. But also on the other side, our security is all, you know,
Defined.
based on, yeah, the whole encryption paradigm that we're relying on a daily basis, whether we're doing this through conversation, whether we're sending data to our banks and everything, it all comes back to encryption. Encryption relies on very hard math. That is basically telling any hacker that if you have enough power, you're going to crack this. But if you don't have enough power, good luck. And so with quantum computers, quantum machines, there might be a chance where the majority of our encryption is going to go down the drain. And again, the positive things, not to be like a pessimistic here, that's just a guy, is that there are a lot of algorithms that are being developed that are, they're not friendly, let's say, with quantum, let's say, which is cool, which means even if you have quantum computers and such, these are not going to be susceptible to being broken, which is interesting. But again, everybody's experimenting. Google has their own fair share, AWS, Microsoft, but I think there's going to be a lot of cool things behind it. It's only that the encryption part of security, if we manage it, they're going to be in good hands.
Yeah, exactly. Um, how does the tech scene look like in Bahrain? I'm sure you have a young population. Are people, you know, going?
Yeah.
You have enough
So
young people learning to AI and to code and all these things. Is there an appetite?
yes, the reality of the matter is Bahrain is a small business, a small country. So we- without the expats, we're less than 1 million, if I'm not mistaken, or close to a million. And with the expats, we're two, give or take. So we're a small country, very, very small. However, there are really great minds and everything, but you got to understand the volume is needed when you want to build things. Not everybody can do just everything. This is why there's a lot of emphasis on the startup scene. And this is also something that I might object with just a little bit. I feel that there's a lot of money to be thrown at things that are not worthy, if you ask me. And this is my honest opinion. Like, before I give money to somebody, I just need to make sure that this money is going to be spent correctly for the sake of the economy.
Yeah.
Is it like a small startup? With all the respect, is it a salon? Is it something else? Will it have huge like benefits down the road next 10 or 20 or 30 years? Or is it just like a shortcut that somebody want to have outside of their full-time job? So these things will need to be much better. And we are getting much, much better. We have an entity named Tankeen. We have a lot of entities that are spending money, but they're trying their best to do due diligence. But this tech space is very fast. Everybody's just trying to figure it out. Even techies like us, we are always on the run. We are literally on the bleeding edge, not even the edge, on the bleeding edge. So for the startup scene to really be nurtured the right way, you got to work with people who are at least trying to figure out what the hell is happening here.
Exactly.
And then focus your financial energy towards things that might blow up in fruit. But yes, the tech scene is here. It's interesting. You see a lot of ideas. Well, one thing that I'm not a big fan of when you bring an idea from the outside, from the West, and you try to Arabize it, let's say, make it
I agree.
culturally adequate, and then you say, hey, this is a new idea, guys. Come on in, give me some money. I mean, okay, it might work commercially, but it's not invasion. And
Yeah.
this is my beef.
Are we building any in-house technologies in the Middle East right now? Like something from our scratch, or are we just copying foreign concepts?
No, I saw a lot of people working on EVs, like electric vehicles,
Yeah.
um, few things in encryption, but I'm not the right person to say if they're going to succeed or not. I wouldn't know, honestly. But, R&D is a state of mind. It's a state of mind on an individual level, on a family level, on a government level. If you're not focused on R&D, you're just, going with the show, basically. So there are R&D stuff. Maybe I think the AI space is pretty interesting because we have now a fair playing ground. We can bring our Arabic culture and tradition, experience and language, and build things that can branch out away from what the West is really focused on currently. You know? But it's very fun because you have Mistral, for example. Mistral, the company, the French company, they just, built their own model, the Saba, if you heard about it. They have a new model, Saba, and believe it or not, they are actually charging into the Arabic space. So it's a cool thing for everybody. It's awesome that they're really focused on this.
Of course. I think AI is like kids. You're raising human being. Well, you're raising AIs is like you're raising a creature, and then it depends on what you feed them, right? So, and then which actually takes me to the robotics. I think very soon, and I tell my kids like in 10 years from now, when you're a bit older, we'll have a robot, and you will interact with the robot. So, how do you see that? Do you think it's true? Will it happen? Will everybody have a robot humanoid like we have cars?
I mean, look, the robot
Or
discussion,
are we?
robotics,
Yeah.
I mean, it's always hard to predict on the spot. But if I had to say, look, robotics are going to be such an important thing for mechanical workloads on moving things, carrying things, if we get it right. But what I'm focused on currently is this cognitive sort of workloads that we're focused on that are taking the majority of our work time. And for example, I work in the tech space. The majority of my time is actually on the machine because this is my gateway to doing job, my work. So, and an LLM brings a lot of value. I never thought about robotics in my own daily lives. But I do know that there are a few jobs where mechanical workloads are important. They are the actual gist of the operation. And Boston Dynamics are doing some amazing work, these companies, and robotics is not easy at all. I had dabbled with it for a little bit, and let me tell you, we take a lot of things for granted in our bodies that you only figure out and understand when you start working with robotics because they're no longer taken for granted. And this is fascinating for me. Why? Because just like what you said in the beginning, building AI in whatever shape that it is, right? Whether it's robotics, language, vision, it's like rebuilding or recreating humans from the ground up. So there's a lot of philosophy involved and belief as well, right? So it,
Exactly.
exactly. But all in all, we're discovering ourselves and we're creating the next, basically the descendants of human beings. So it's fascinating.
Totally, and making the brain fit like you're building a body. Robotics are bodies, and I think we're in a good place because you're working on AI. That's like the brains, and then you're just trying to connect the brain with the body, which also shows us how we are. It's such a miracle to be able to move and easily and touch and feel and all these things. It's amazing.
We take it for granted every day. So I have a lot of like appreciation for how the human body works. Yeah. When you try to replicate few things out of it, right? So even as something as simple as LLMs, it's just hard to get it to do things right, And we are full-fledged humans having autonomy. So, I mean, it's very fascinating, not from the tech space, but also philosophy in terms of the meaning of the job is what gives me the most.
And yeah, that's why we talk about biointelligence sometimes. Like how biology works and even nature, how nature works.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that we could learn from that, from nature.
Right.
To
And
it.
you know what is weird is that whenever you bring the subject of AI to people, everybody has a different way to react to it.
Yeah.
So, like 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago, I was in Google in Dubai, and when I was bringing this concept of symbiosis, which was actually the name of my talk slash demo between machines and AI, the crowd was completely like open, like an open arm, right? Come on in. Like we need to be better as human beings, as species. On the other hand, when I went to the next talk a week later on in Bahrain, I've done it to businesses and SMEs, it was the other way around. People actually came and was like, "Hey, you want to kill our jobs?" And look up, just like, chill, guys. I'm just here to tell you where the technology is going. You have to decide. but it's all a big conversation for everybody. Everybody has to have a voice, and it's important. But the reaction is always different for everybody.
Is it true that a person who knows AI will not be replaced? It just you know that famous sentence that AI is not going to replace your job, but somebody who knows how to use AI will do.
I actually use this a lot, and I'm debating myself. If this is the right choice because like agents are getting much better, and they are taking more and more and more and more workload by the minute. So it is debatable, but if there's one thing that we have to stick to is always we have to always grow, whether education wise, even mentality, intellectually speaking. I mean, what is the problem if AI can do all of this clunky workload that we are suffering? We're not actually going to check on our families. We don't have time for ourselves to carry on our hobbies because we're too occupied with this. The $1 million problem is people seem to have these two things conflated, meaning like self-meaning, self-worthiness, and the job. If we can break those two things, and if AI or whatever that we're going to come up with is going to cover all of these necessities, and we focus on human values or human meaning, then we're not going to have a problem because you might have meaning by drawing, by reflecting on life, and you're going to feel good. It doesn't have to be the actual job. But as of today, jobs are the medium that we use for meaning.
Exactly, because now actually intelligence is just a commodity. Like you can have intelligence next to you. So now it's about being a human being. Humanity is more important. Being able to interact with humans now actually is more valuable than before, right?
I'm telling you, like, for example, so I would bring this idea to everybody. I graduated from public schools, and I remember the pain being in a public school now that my kids are in a private school. So when you go to a public school, you have like 60 or 50 people, or like at best it's 30 crammed in one classroom. And the instructor has to make everybody happy. And they can't do that. It's just hard. It's beyond their ability. And so to have an AI that can say, look, I'm going to tell you exactly how calculus works, and you can be as vulnerable as you can, and nobody's going to care about if you get it from the right time, first time or not. To have this personalized experience is something I would have killed for back in the day. And now this is something on the table now with AI. You can have your personalized tutor. So what is the problem? Now, if you ask tutors and instructors, like when I do this for my talks, they get crazy. It's like, they're going to take our jobs and everything. What do you care about the most? Do you care about your job or the benefit of society and civilization? Okay. The latter is much more important because you can find meaning in a different fashion. And this is what I'm agree with. I do agree with you.
Exactly. Even as if you're a business owner, now you don't care as much about how much somebody knows.
Yeah.
It's now it's all about soft skills. Can this guy is this guy can this guy talk to other team members, to the clients, because the knowledge is there. I'll just give you an AI that will help you figure things out. You don't have to know much, but you need to be the best human being you can be.
Exactly. But even social skills, if you're doing it over the phone or any disconnected medium, people can't tell the difference, or at least we're getting into that direction now. Like with 11 Lab, with proper voice cloning, with proper content being created on the spot, they wouldn't even know the difference. And I tried that with my mom multiple times. When I voice cloned myself, I swear to God, I did actually clone it. And the content was using a very quick inferencing engine, which was Grok, by the way.
Oh, wow.
And
The latest drops like it.
yeah, Grok has this multiple models you can choose from, including Llama 3.1, 405 billion, which is the best one before 3.3 and the rest. But the idea is when you have inference speed and your natural voice, people seem to not tell the difference, much like the Chinese room experiment. But having you next to me, interacting with me, seeing you in the face, checking your facial gestures, this is the human aspects that we care about.
You shouldn't be competing with AI, right? That's what you're trying to say. Don't compete with AI because you're gonna lose.
Yeah.
Compete with humans.
AI
Humans will need humans in a way at the end of the day, right?
100%. This is what I'm trying to tell my friends. Like, look, AI will always be better than us in certain domains. Let's focus on the human aspects that we're really good at.
Yeah, exactly. In your trainings, I'm gonna wrap up the conversation with this. Can you tell us what you focus on? How does it look like when you do workshops for companies?
Sure. So when I do this, understanding the audience is pretty important. Are these people technical? Are these people board of directors in a bank. It's exactly like what I do. Are these people coming from an executive team where they have access to, let's say, technical teams, operational teams, and they have access to the management? So their position in the whole hierarchy is really important. Other than that, what is their stance on AI? Are they big, let's say, proponents of the technology, or do they have bad experiences with it? And then you want to bring in like an example from, or bring in anecdote from the domain so they can respect what you're talking about. I mean, I can't talk about how AI is cool to a robotics company if I have already applied it only in banking. It has to be very relevant and close to their heart. And this takes a lot of power, energy to tailor that content. So I mean, speaking, I always thought in the beginning that speaking, being an educator is an easy deal if you know what you're talking about. But I figured out that the other 60 or 70% is actually studying your clients before getting there and building the right narrative.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
wow.
not easy to be a teacher. Like teacher can
Oh,
be the best expert in the world, but can't like I drive very well, but I couldn't teach others to drive. Like it's not given.
exactly. It takes, like, for example, you got to be passionate as well. I mean, what's the point of me teaching AI if I don't really use it in my life, if I'm not a big believer in it? And seeing is much better than believing. I feel that there's a lot of speakers and people who are talking out of thin air, which doesn't really, resound with the client or let's say the people there. People care about very personal relationships, personal affairs when you're talking to them. So you want to give them your anecdotes. They appreciate genuine. And your wisdom is, yeah. This has always been tried.
AI.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Spot on. So it is cool. It's cool to be in that space and very fortunate. And I mean, thank you again for having me, man.
No, thank you. Just the last question: which sectors are you working with right now? Like,
Okay.
which
So,
sectors are looking at like adapting AI massively in the region?
so telco is a pretty big deal given the volume. Banking, financial institutions, insurance, educational institutions are crazy about
Big.
AI. Government is also a very big client base. They have a lot of data. They don't know how to tap into that gold mine. Um, But yeah, other than that, SMEs as well. So we have products for SMEs are cheaper a little bit, and they're more understandable with limited functionalities. But the beautiful thing about AI is that it's, again, and I say this a lot, it's a horizontal platform. You can put multiple pillars on the same common level, right? There's a lot of things. It's not only one pillar you focus on and that's it. No, it's one thing, and they all share from the same goodies.
Well, with that, thank you so much. It was great having you, Amin, and I'd love to have a part two sometime soon.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll see you soon.
See you. Bye.